So this is really a story about an odd couple friendship that just defied all expectations. And it's all detailed in the true crime memoir, Jigsaw and Jane. On one side, you've got Jane Hawitt, living this quiet life. Think tennis clubs and carpools. And on the other side, you have John St. John, a man who, for a living, literally walked among the dead. So the big question is, how on earth did these two even meet? Well, their story doesn't kick off in some gritty detective's office. Nope. It begins in a quiet suburb with a writer named Jane who was just feeling like she needed a change. At 37, Jane was itching to tell a story. She actually had her sights set on the world of professional tennis, planning to write about big stars like Chris Evert. But yeah, that plan was about to get completely tossed out the window. Think about the total opposite of a flashy TV detective. That was John St. John. He was more like Columbo, kind of unassuming with these rumpled, off-the-rack suits, a felt fedora, and this disarming smile that would flash a gold tooth. Seriously, you'd barely notice the guy in a crowd. But here's the thing. Behind that ordinary appearance was the man who held the LAPD's most coveted badge #1. Over his 43-year career, he didn't just solve murders. He solved over 1,000 of them and put a dozen serial killers behind bars. The whole journey began one morning while Jane was just sipping her coffee, reading the newspaper. An article caught her eye, and it wasn't just interesting, it completely changed the entire trajectory of her life. Suddenly, writing about tennis seemed, kind of trivial. This detective, the one who caught the Freeway Killer, this was the real story. So she started calling the homicide squad. And as you can imagine, they basically brushed her off. But Jane just refused to take no for an answer. Her persistence finally paid off, and she secured a meeting that would end up defining the next 13 years of her life. And you gotta love this part because it just perfectly illustrates the contrast between them right from the get-go. She's sitting at the bar, expecting some Hollywood super cop to walk in, all while this quiet, unassuming man is sitting right next to her, listening to her complain about him before he even introduced himself. So Jane got her wish. She was gonna write the book. But this meant stepping way out of her suburban comfort zone and plunging headfirst into a reality she'd only ever read about in crime novels. St. John's initial nickname for her was Miss Panic, and honestly, Jane admitted she totally earned it. She was afraid of pretty much everything: dead bodies, drunks on the street, the dark alleys of LA. But the thing is, her determination to tell this story was just way stronger than her fear. For the next 13 years, she was Jigsaw's shadow. And she got this unprecedented access to the LAPD's elite robbery-homicide unit. I mean, she saw it all: the grisly crime scenes, the stark reality of the morgue, and the raw, unfiltered world of the detectives who lived in it day in and day out. So what really made John St. John so legendary? How did this quiet, unassuming guy become the man with badge #1? What was his secret? Well, his nickname really says it all. He wasn't about high-speed chases or kicking down doors. His method was to solve crimes painstakingly, relentlessly. He would piece together these tiny, overlooked details that no one else saw, until the full, horrifying picture just emerged, like a jigsaw puzzle. Jane watched him hunt absolute monsters. She chronicled his work on a dozen serial killer cases, including William Bonin, the Freeway Killer, who used LA's sprawling highway system to find and dump his young male victims. And then there was William Bradford, an amateur photographer who twisted the Hollywood dream into a complete nightmare, luring aspiring models to their deaths. This quote, it gets to the very heart of how Jigsaw thought. He understood the chillingly casual, almost mundane nature of these killers. He knew they weren't just going to stop on their own. He had to weaponize his own relentless curiosity to piece together their patterns and end their reigns of terror for good. But as the years rolled on, this whole project, it started to change. It became about so much more than just murder and mayhem. It really became about the unbelievable bond that formed between the two of them. Jane wasn't just a fly on the wall observing cases anymore. She was bearing witness to human tragedy right alongside a man who, despite seeing the absolute worst of humanity every single day, somehow held on to this deep compassion for the victims and their families. Through her writing, Jane was able to capture the profound human cost of these crimes. Just think about that line. For so many mothers, the only thing they had left of their child was a piece of paper. This wasn't just about solving puzzles anymore. It was about bearing witness to an unbearable tragedy that, without a doubt, changed her forever. But of course, every journey and every career has to come to an end eventually. So let's take a look at how this final chapter unfolded for badge number 1. For a street cop who knew every back alley in LA like the back of his hand, losing his car was like losing his world. I mean, his Blue Crown Victoria wasn't just a car, it was his office, his sanctuary. And rather than be stuck behind a desk, he just retired. He passed away 2 years later, but true to form, he was still working a case, the infamous Black Dahlia murder, right up until the very end. Jane Hawitt's journey really answers that question perfectly, doesn't it? She chased a story that most people probably thought was a joke. She stepped into a world of complete darkness. And what she found there wasn't just a book. She found an extraordinary story of courage, of tenacity, and a friendship that proves the most profound connections can be forged in the most unlikely and darkest of places.